It's
Yeah, no problem.
been one of those days. I finished it 20 minutes ago.
We're about to start streaming, and then if you guys are ready, I'm going to start recording as soon as we're streaming.
I think we're ready.
We're live.
Thank you, and everyone, and welcome to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission Planning Committee meeting on February 15th, 2022. I'll now call this meeting to order, and I think I've got a screen coming that I can read for the next official part of the introduction. Some Zoom call tips for the meeting. Please mute your audio when not speaking. Please use only one source of audio, computer or phone. Do not put your phone on hold. Submit questions in the chat box whenever possible. And to request the floor, please use raise a hand feature in Zoom and wait to be acknowledged by the chair. Before proceeding, to make a motion, please state your name before making a first or second motion, and please keep your points clear and concise. We will be meeting our live meeting requirements tonight through YouTube by streaming on YouTube. And I think we can jump into introductions and then minutes. But first, the introductions. I'm the chair, Philip Gussman. Aaron, our vice chair.
Good evening, everyone. Erin Barbie, Planning Commission.
Commissioner Gaston.
Melissa Gaston, Planning Commission.
Commissioner Harvey.
RJ Harvey, Planning Commission.
Commissioner Russell.
Good evening, Will Russell, Planning Commission.
And did Peter get a chance to join as I was talking? No. If he joins, we will recognize and introduce him. Excellent. Now, staff, if we can start with, I am behind the ball. We can start with our wonderful co-host, Kathy. Or
Hank Burnett, planning staff.
excellent. And Alicia, do we have Alicia on board?
Alicia Osborne, planning staff.
Excellent. And our coordinator of coordinators, Xenia?
Xenia Duhaney, planning staff.
Thank you. And who am I missing on staff that isn't?
Gretchen Flores, planning staff.
Thank you. Any
Dr.
other
Gonzalez,
questions?
planning staff.
Perfect.
Laura
And
Harmon, planning staff.
thank you. Good deal. Now, if we can jump into Caroline from county.
Hey, Caroline Sawyer, Mecklenburg County Real Estate.
Excellent. And looks like we have Anna also from real estate.
Anna Radcliffe, city real estate.
Perfect. And anyone else I haven't recognized?
Ruby Pringle, Met County Real Estate.
Thank you, Ruby. I knew I would miss someone on that list, scrolling and bouncing around. All right, is there anyone else on the call that I have not had a chance to introduce? Excellent. That completes introductions. Now would be a good time to consider the matter of the meeting minutes approval from the last couple of meetings.
This is Commissioner Barbie. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Excellent. I think we need to make sure we include both dates.
I would love for those dates to be in front of me and I can include those.
Oh, okay.
There we go. This is Commissioner Barbie once again, and I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes for December 21st, 2021, and the minutes for January 18th, 2022.
Excellent. Do I hear a second?
Commissioner Russell, second.
Moved by Barbie, seconded by Russell, and I will run through the vote. Commissioner Barbie,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaston,
Yes.
Commissioner Harvey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Russell.
Yes.
And I, as the chair, vote yes as well. The minutes are approved unanimously. Let us jump into the mandatory referrals. Well, let me actually just confirm with staff. There's nothing else on the minutes.
No, that's good. Those 2 dates,
Perfect.
that's perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we didn't have to do it again. Now let's jump into the mandatory referrals. We've got a couple here. First off, I'll ask if anybody has either of these that they'd like to pull out and either get a presentation on or have questions on. They do both seem pretty straightforward. If we don't have any other questions, I would entertain a motion that is on the screen for anyone interested.
This is Commissioner Gaston. The Planning Committee reviewed mandatory referral reports 22-05 and 22-06 on February 15th, 2022, and has no additional comments for the submitting agencies.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
Properly moved. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Russell, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Russell. Properly motioned and seconded. Let's move through the roll call. Commissioner Barbie,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaston,
Yes.
Commissioner Harvey,
Yes.
Commissioner Russell.
Yes.
Excellent. And the chair votes aye as yes as well. That also is approved with unanimously. Excellent. Now we get to jump into the exciting bits of the evening. Thank you, staff, for who is helping with the mandatory referrals and everything. We give you a few hours or an hour or so left back in your day. Kathy, what have you got?
There we go. So tonight I'm going to run through phase 3, the process update, talk about the second draft policy map, summary of revisions to address concerns that have been raised, talk about the community engagement that we've done throughout the process and more specifically in phase 3, key outstanding issues, what that resolution process looks like, and then touch on future planning approaches and types of planning initiatives that can be expected in the future, and then discuss the updated schedule and next steps. So this gives you an idea of, there's 3 very major initiatives going on simultaneously. Of course, the policy map, which you all are very familiar with and have been considering at most of your meetings, and then the strategic mobility plan, which you've received information on as a full commission, and then the unified development ordinance. So this schedule kind of gives you an idea of how those 3 things lay out as far as the long term over those projects lifetimes, and kind of where we are as far as the policy map goes, which is really kind of leading and informing those other efforts. So let's just touch on engagement. I know you all have seen this quite a few times, but I think it's always helpful to go back over the fact that we've had 3 phases of engagement. The first beginning in the summer, and that was really focused on educating and informing, and it ended in September. And then the second phase of engagement began on October 13th with the release of the first draft policy map. And so that had an education component to it as well, but it also really focused on discussion around the map and then comparisons to what we were calling the status quo. Right now, we are on phase 3 of engagement. So phase 2 ended in October. Phase 3 started in November and really continues on throughout the rest of the process until it goes to council for consideration. And as you all know, there's been a very broad toolkit that has been used throughout all the phases of engagement. So just looking a little more in depth at phase 3, there's been numerous ways to engage, which you all are familiar with. The online map tool is very popular. We also received quite a few comments through email. We held listening sessions, and not to discount the fact that we did have hard copies available at libraries for those that preferred that method. So this phase of engagement began on January 18th. And really the comment tool closed on February 8th, but the engagement continues, as I said, throughout the phase until it's considered by council. So if you look at the numbers for phase 3, I know we've talked about this before, but there were 18 hours of one-on-one sessions with staff where folks could sit down with staff and kind of talk one-on-one with what their questions or concerns were. 23 folks took advantage of that opportunity. Then we had 2 of the more broad community conversations. We had an afternoon option and an evening option, and there were 35 folks that took advantage of that. We've had 688 comments online, and then 70 comments received by some of the additional methods that we offered. So if you look over all 3 phases of engagement, you can see that we've had over 6,000 comments received throughout the process. So let's take a look at the second draft of the policy map, which I know we've talked about some of these things before, but it's always good to revisit, what is the policy map? What is it and what is it not? So the second draft map, as I mentioned, was released on the 18th, and it's really the implementation of the place-based policies from the comprehensive plan. And it's a policy document, so it's more visionary. It's directly related to the UDO in that the UDO has the regulations or the mandatory components that would really implement that vision for certain components of the comprehensive plan. So the place type have more guiding principles, more concepts. The districts are really where you find the legally enforceable rules. So sometimes I think folks get confused and they're looking for the comprehensive plan to provide very specific information regarding heights and other things, whereas those are really outlined what's the expectation, and the more specifics or the regulatory component would be found in the UDO and most specifically in the zoning ordinance component. And I'd also mention that it's not a one-to-one translation for what the zoning will be. The zoning map will be a separate process with its own methodology that will happen after the policy map is adopted. So some key themes, and I think these are important to keep in mind in terms of also what some of the revisions that we made to the methodology throughout the process, most specifically from, I guess you'd say draft 1 to 2. So some of those key takeaways were prioritizing preservation, specifically of single family neighborhoods, parks and greenways, campuses, focusing residential density near existing infrastructure, reducing the size of activity centers in some locations, and also manufacturing and logistics. And that again gets to kind of the transition component, especially near neighborhoods, to buffer the more intense place types where they're adjacent to neighborhoods. Increasing the opportunity for commercial to transition to a more walkable format. And so I would mention too that the commercial place type inherently has a more walkable is more walkable in nature than you might, than maybe like the commercial land use might think of today. But there was a real desire to increase the opportunity for that to increase to even a more walkable, like neighborhood activity center or the activity center place type. And then again, just addressing transitions from activity centers to neighborhoods. And we'll talk a little bit more about these in a second here. So key revisions in the second draft in the live category, again, preserving existing single family neighborhoods as neighborhood 1, preserving greenways, community and regional parks as parks and preserved. And we worked with Park and Rec on this particular revision. Absorbing neighborhood parks into their surrounding place types. So we've talked before that parks are appropriate in any place type, and they are, when we talk about neighborhoods, it's not just single family residential or residential in general that we're talking about. Really, there's other components such as parks, churches, schools that really make a neighborhood. Absorbing utility sites into the surrounding place type and recognizing that they are there to support those place types. Increasing housing density in uptown and near light rail stations, and ensuring the preservation of existing place types in historic districts. In the work category, we made revisions to map primarily manufacturing and logistics on airport-owned property and in the airport noise overlay. Making some adjustments to the campus place type threshold to preserve large existing campuses, repurposing older manufacturing and logistics where really components of those uses don't really fit where the manufacturing and logistics industry is today. For example, floor plates, loading docks, heights of the buildings, those sorts of things, allowing those to transition to innovation mixed use where that may be the best option. And then where there are valuable manufacturing and logistics sites, preserving those where that use is best suited. And then in the play category, reducing the size of regional activity centers and some commercial activity centers, again, in an effort to buffer in that neighborhood transition. And back to allowing the transition from commercial to a more walkable format, that resulted in increasing the frequency of neighborhood centers in some locations. So just to give an example of what we're talking about or what some of the changes might look like. So this was a comment that we received in the Dilworth area around the 300 block of East Park Avenue. And the comment was that odd number addresses should be N1 versus N2. So that was a change that we made because the use and character is appropriate in this place type. Another comment in the Dilworth area was regarding the 2200 block of Park Road, and the request was, or the suggestion was, to change from N2 to N1. And that resulted in actually a change to neighborhood activity center. So if you think about it, and we've talked about this before, but not in quite some time, really in the neighborhood place type bucket, it really builds. In neighborhood 2, neighborhood 1 is also appropriate, and in neighborhood activity center, neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2 are also appropriate. So for this particular location, really neighborhood activity center was the more appropriate place type, but it does also accommodate what the suggestion was. This is near Elizabeth in the Sunnyside neighborhood. The request was, or the suggestion, in Sunnyside from Hawthorne to Louise, that these are residential homes and the place type should be N1 as opposed to N2. So that was a change that was made, and you can see it here. And the use and character, again, was appropriate with this particular place type. Again, in the Dilworth area, in the Kenilworth and Buchanan, block of Kenilworth and Buchanan, there was a comment that the place type that was more appropriate would be N2. And so this change was also made because it was appropriate for this particular location. In the Moorhead areas, this kind of the edge of Dilworth, there was a suggestion that the 600, 700, and 800 blocks of East Moorhead should be neighborhood activity center as opposed to regional activity center. And the reason cited was a transition to neighborhood 1. So in this particular, there were some requests that a change was not made. And this would be one of those because the current zoning and the form is more appropriate for this particular area. This was the most appropriate place type. So let's look at some of the outstanding issue areas. And I know we discussed this at the commission meeting on Monday, but we are still considering and looking at some suggestions based on, again, the campus place type revision. So this is one place type where we have made a few adjustments to the thresholds and continue to look at this. And there's what we would call piecemeal place type revisions where they don't necessarily fit within the methodology. We're still considering some of those. Of course, as with any effort, it is not perfect. So there are still data issues and human error and rezonings take place constantly. So we're going back and revisiting and reviewing really suggestions and really kind of combing through the map, generally speaking, based on all of these particular components. And then revisiting and reviewing Silver Line recommendations. And then I would also say we're not only meeting with that team, that staff team, but we continue to touch base with our entitlement services staff, historic district commission staff, really to kind of touch base on all of those recommendations. And then clarifying messaging around the map. And I would say that in this particular instance, it's really, as I mentioned earlier, I think sometimes there's, the commenter may not realize that the use that they are suggesting is more appropriate for a particular location is actually accommodated in the place type that is recommended in the draft for that area. So there's still some education and messaging going on around that particular issue. So if we look at after policy map adoption, it is not the end of the work. It's really beginning of a whole lot of additional work and efforts and projects that we'll have in the future. So the map is scheduled to go to City Council for as a request for action on March 28th. And if it was approved on March 28th, the effective date of the map would be 3 months later, so July 1st. And that's really to get to allow staff and internal processes to catch up and rezonings to catch up and all of those different issues. At that time, we would retire the current land use tool. So the existing adopted future land use tool that we use and reference today would be retired and replaced by the 2040 policy map. And the map would be used as not only the adopted land use policy, but also for decisions in capital, other decisions in capital investments. And then there would be a whole gamut of future planning initiatives to monitor and track progress. And that would include, as an example, an annual report and an implementation dashboard. And we will continue to refine the processes for updating the comprehensive plan and the policy map. So these, really are snapshots in time, and that's recognized as our community continues to grow and change. And we fully expect that there will be changes that will be made in the future as we move forward. And then there are a number of other supporting planning initiatives, and those would be community area plans and other strategic plans. So if we look at those efforts sort of on a timeline, so if the policy map's adopted in the spring, the Unified Development Ordinance hopefully will be adopted in the summer. And then we would begin the annual report for the 2040 comprehensive plan. And also we have some other companion efforts that we expect to really relaunch the Community Planning Academy and develop a community area planning toolkit, and then begin the community area planning process next fall and into the winter. So as far as next steps go, we are here tonight, so we're midway through February already, and providing an update to this body. On Monday, we expect to release the final recommended policy map, and then that will go to City Council for public comment on the 28th of February. We'll come back to the full commission at your March meeting to go over a summary of recommended revisions and have discussion on the 7th. We'll come back to this body for a request for recommended action, and that might include a map with an addendum. And what we mean by that is there may be changes that are suggested to that final policy map, and those would go to council kind of as a separate piece. So it would be very clear of what those suggested changes are. And then it will go to City Council for action on March 28th. And that is what I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Excellent. Thank you, Kathy. I have a couple, but let me take a quick look and see if we have any questions from the fellow commissioners. Will, go ahead and jump on. Commissioner Russell, pardon me. Did you have your hand raised?
I did. Thank you.
Okay, there you are.
Mr. Chair. I got a question, as I always do. It's more general in nature. I noticed in a couple of on the first two slides, there were some mentions about the single family neighborhoods being preserved in N1, considering that 84% of Charlotte's land use is tied up in single family neighborhoods. Can you clarify what that means when you're talking about preserve? What is being preserved in that statement?
So throughout the process, we received comments on sort of by preserve, meaning not like preserve as in a historic district, but that those neighborhoods, the more appropriate place type was for N1. So if you remember the mapping methodology, in some instances it relied on zoning and a few other things, and there were areas where N2 might have been recommended within what's, predominantly a single family neighborhood, and that the more appropriate place type in that particular location would be N1. So that's what I'm referring to in that instance.
Okay, and does that limit the flexibility that we have to change single family neighborhoods in N1 types for future use? I'm just concerned that we're locking ourselves into a pattern that we won't be able to change.
Well, if you remember, N1 does allow, it broadens past just single family. So it allows for the duplex and triplex format if the zoning requirements can be met. So it's a little bit maybe confusing in that it says single family, but it does allow for those additional housing types. So it doesn't make any changes in that regard.
Well, I think part of the thinking, the logic on the comp plan was by making those changes to our single family, quote unquote, because it's really not just that. Zoning, in the comp plan, making that change at the base level would give us that marginal increase in potential density, at least throughout our entire residential sphere. Is that fair, Kathy? Or
yes, it is.
Okay, no, and I appreciate that because that's what I was looking for. And I mean, I'll have to engage with planning staff specifically around a handful of items as it relates to residential zoning. I think that the minimum lot requirements, the setbacks, and the minimum building sizes are going to be deterrents for the type of density that you're looking for. So I really would like to see staff take a closer look at that and as a text amendment for later discussion, not necessarily try to shoehorn it in the approval process.
Yeah, and to be clear, the policy map it's not a one-to-one translation for the zoning districts that are applied. And there's a number of zoning districts that fit underneath the N1 place type. So there's really a lot of choice in that particular area, and those have different, I can't speak to them. And you know, perhaps in the next presentation will be on the UDO, and they may be able to touch on that there, but there are different setbacks and all of those sorts of things that you're referencing within those different zoning categories.
That's fair. Thank you. Concludes my questions.
Thanks, Will and Kathy. I don't see any other hands up, so I've got one that I just really kind of want to make sure we're being really clear. Kathy, can you run down again how we're communicating with the people who did make requests or suggested edits to the policy map, and in kind of in detail, just, you know, if they sent it in by an email, yeah, we sent them an email back, and if you could run through that.
Right. So typically what we've done, we were just discussing this, kind of finalizing the details around it today. So we have tracked all of the comments on a spreadsheet. And for the phase one, the draft 1 to draft 2, we had, when folks made comments on the map, we had, you know, a response there. And then there was also a spreadsheet that tracked all the comments. And we've continued to do that, and we'll respond to those in a consistent manner. And then more than likely for the phase, once with this particular phase, we'll have, in order to make it clear, there will be kind of different color categories, I guess you'd say, on the map to say, was the suggested change made or was it not? And then an explanation where required as to why. Usually we communicate that the map is available. We have it on our website, and we'll have, we have the date and we'll have the time that the map is available on the website, probably in the next couple of days. We have the date up there, but just the exact time. And then usually we send a blast email to our all the folks that are on our mailing list, and then we usually put it on social media as well, so that folks know that it's available.
So if I suggested an edit in round 1, so to speak, will I get an email? If I registered for it and everything, or will I just get an email that says, hey, we've got a new map? Or will I get a specific email that says your change was taken, was considered and accepted, or whatever?
Yeah, you will get an email, a general email, and it will be kind of your responsibility to go and check whether the change was made or not.
And just being clear, I'm not questioning I mean, it'd be great if we could have individual emails to everybody or call everyone and all that, but that's thousands of suggestion changes. That would be a challenge. Thank you. And then I had one other thing I wanted to point out. I do see our policy map going forward. We've got plenty of work, yes, after approval. You're absolutely correct on that. And I think you're very smart to make sure we include that in our schedule going forward. But it's going to continue to serve as a pretty key element, I think, as we look at looking for my notes, monitoring and tracking of how all this starts to go down when we do roll out and everything. A year from now, I think very few of us think the policy map's going to look just like it does now. So I think it will continue to be a key indicator of are the changes, and to Will's point, does N1 become scarce in places where we know that where there's a lot of pressure to build more. So just wanted to point that out to everybody and recognize for staff the ongoing, by getting this right now, the ongoing impact we'll have going forward. So thank you. Any other questions? Check. I don't see any. All right. Thank you, Kathy.
You're very welcome.
Laura.
Hi.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good connection. I assume you're not in Texas. No, I'm kidding.
Can I tell you that I turned into Darth Vader yesterday when I was in the office? So be forewarned, it does happen. We'll just make do if it does. Thank you for letting me come and give you an update on the Unified Development Ordinance. As this is going to be the committee that will be making a recommendation to council, thought it might be good to start digging a little bit further into some of the details. And so I want to talk you all through, still not super detailed, but more information on the zoning component of the UDO. And in the upcoming months, we will go through additional components of the UDO. Next slide, please. A reminder of the schedule, we released the first draft in early part of October and are accepting public comments through March 18th. So we've got about 4.5 weeks left on gathering those comments. And we have been reviewing comments that we've received and we'll continue doing that. And then we'll, using those comments and additional internal comments, be updating the draft in preparation for a second draft produced in May. It will have red lines so that people can see everything that has changed in the ordinance. And we anticipate also providing a summary of the high-level changes. So again, that draft will be released in May, and that will be the public hearing draft. We are planning on a public hearing in June, a planning committee recommendation in June or early July, making tweaks as needed for the adoption draft, and then asking council for adoption in July. So we have a lot of work to do in a short period of time. We're looking forward to working with you guys on this. So most of you guys have probably seen this, probably all of you have seen this, but this is the general content in the UDO, and you can see where the zoning component fits. We also have stormwater and natural resources, subdivision, streets, and infrastructure. And this slide also has stormwater and natural resources twice. Sorry, I came up the other day and we missed it, and it's still here. Then UDO administration, nonconformities, and enforcement. So it is it's a lot in 608 pages. We hear a lot. That's a lot of pages. I think we're over 1,000 on the current regulations that we've consolidated and updated and revised. So it is smaller and in a single document, and we're quite proud of that. Next slide. So starting right into, and I don't know, Chair, if you may want to have me stop at logical places through here, feel free to. I have about 35 slides, so be glad to stop and answer questions along the way as you prefer. So jumping right into the zoning districts, we have the neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2 place types. And then you can see we have a series of zoning districts designed to implement those place types. So the in Article 4, we have the neighborhood 1 zoning districts, and in Article 5, we have the 3 neighborhood 2 zoning districts. Next slide. For the 4 employment place types, we have the commercial place type and 2 zoning districts to implement that. 3 zoning districts to implement the campus place types, 2 for manufacturing and logistics, and then for the light industrial mixed use place type, we do have the innovation mixed use zoning district. So you can hopefully see the close parallel between the place types and how zoning plays out. And then for the centers place type, we have 1 zoning district for the neighborhood center, 2 for the community activity center, and then 3 for the regional activity center, including our uptown area. And then the 4 transit-oriented development zoning districts would apply in the different center types. Next slide. So in addition to those districts, we have a number of overlay and special purpose districts. Probably everyone's familiar with the historic district overlay. What we have in the draft is very similar to the current regulations. There is a thought from staff that there might be another flavor of historic districts that we'll be talking about down the road. We have new districts, a cottage court overlay. I'll show you pictures of that, what that looks like in a minute. A neighborhood character overlay, residential infill overlay. 2 districts dealing with manufactured homes, 1 being an overlay district and 1 being for a park. And then we have the airport noise disclosure overlay that comes out of our current regulations and identifies an area around the airport where there are noise disclosure requirements because of the noise of the planes. Next. So you may have been wondering, how do we get from our current regulations to the new zoning districts in the UDO? So we have created a translation table, and on the effective date of the UDO, all of the conventional zoning districts that are on the ground will be translated to one of the new zoning districts, the UDO zoning districts. So what that doesn't tell you, and what it's important for you to know, is that we cannot and will not be translating at this point in time our conventional zoning districts. We'll look at those later in a more detailed study, because each conditional zoning district, including our optional districts, is a unique district.
And just to be clear, you intended to say conditional zoning district, correct?
Will not translate. Yes.
Right.
If that's not what I said, that's what I meant to say.
Yep. Perfect.
Conditionals
Yep.
will not.
Perfect. Thank you.
But conventionals where we don't have a site plan, there are no conditions, those will all translate. And then over time, we'll be going back and making sure that they all translated to where we wanted them to get to with respect to the policy map, place types on it. So next slide. As you get into the zoning standards, some of the things that you should expect to see, not all of these for all districts, but for a number of them, the lot standards, lot sizes, width, building coverage, building siding, where our setbacks, where build-to zones, so forth, building height standards, minimums and maximums, including a maximum allowed with bonus, building articulation, which is something that has really been added in TOD, and we think quite successfully. So building length, blank wall areas, we did have that standard before. It's been updated. Minimum ground floor height, prominent entry spacing, transparency on ground floor and upper floors, some building design, not architectural design, but some key elements of buildings being facade modulation, lower floor design, how parapet walls are handled, building materials. And then we have standards on open space, the different types of open space, parking requirements, both vehicular, bicycle, and actually EV charging spaces, and also the treatment of parking lots and parking structures, standards for loading and service, including solid waste service, our landscaping and screening standards that include what we currently call buffers, but are changing in the UDO to landscape yards. So we have different kinds of buffers in other parts of the UDO. We thought that was confusing. And then our sign regs, which you probably remember we did update a few years ago. They've been incorporated into the UDO and we've had to make some alignment to make it all work. Next slide. Things to know as you are in the UDO. Excuse me. Many of the zoning standards are controlled by frontages, and setbacks are an example of a standard that is controlled by a frontage. So if you are on a main street, you may have a different setback for your district than a 4 to 5 lane avenue boulevard. There are 9 frontage types as currently written, and that can be found in Article 3 of the UDO. But this is something that was introduced in TOD, and we're using it much more extensively in the UDO. Another thing to understand, setbacks are measured from the future back of curb for all districts except the neighborhood 1 districts. So in your setback, you also have to include room for street trees, sidewalks, and any additional space you want behind your sidewalk. I think that can be a little bit confusing because setbacks right now are measured from the right-of-way line. So it looks like our setbacks are very large compared to what we have now, but we're comparing apples and oranges. So we are not measuring from the same location. Also, we have the development bonus that was included in TOD that works for primarily height and used for height. I don't know if anyone's used it for open space, actually. We have a number of actions that can result in additional height. Affordable housing using the Charlotte Business Inclusion Program, providing additional open space, high performance construction, which means like LEED or green globes, new street connections when they're not required by ordinance, dedication of future transit right-of-way, and electronic mobility lockers. More conversations on do we have that quite right? We're hearing a little bit of feedback on that. But the place you can go and find out more about the development bonus is in section 16.3 of the ordinance.
All right, maybe we make a quick quick option, see if we've got any questions or if we've already
Sure.
put everyone to sleep or anything. No offense. Any questions from the commissioners? Go ahead and chime in if y'all don't mind. Will, hit us.
Yeah, at the risk of y'all shooting me because I keep prolonging the meeting with all my questions.
Not at all. This is what we're here for.
Well, I have several. So I'm gonna start from the back and work my way forward. So I saw that you're talking about the density of the bonuses, the density bonuses that have come back again. You know, we've kind of gone down that path before previously and didn't go as well. Has any thought been given to including the reduction or elimination of parking setbacks, lot sizes, and building sizes as a potential bonus option, as opposed to just increasing the height?
So a number of those items, so you said lot size in the districts where we have the height bonus, and the height bonus is being used, frankly, quite successfully now in TOD. So this is the TOD height bonus, not the density bonus for residential, just for clarification. And I want to tout that we have committed $2 million to the Housing Trust Fund that has come through this bonus program, as well as some other things. But some of those standards are not found in the zoning districts where the height bonus is. Like typically we don't have a minimum lot size. Setbacks are minimal. We have to have some kind of setback because your building can't sit on top of your sidewalk. What were the other items that you mentioned?
Parking. Yeah.
Parking in most of the districts where we have the bonus, they have parking maximums, not parking minimums. And interesting conversation yesterday at Council's Transportation and Planning Committee about how we should even be addressing parking in the community. So we think some of those things we've actually really whittled down in the current ordinance already.
Okay. And then second unrelated question. So in the commercial zoning, what are we, well, let me preface that. I don't know if anybody saw the Observer today, but the that eclectic little flea market that is at Eastland Mall has been disbanded because it's being moved for for the start of construction. So that's really a loss of character and economic development in an area that quite frankly needs it. So are there provisions within commercial zoning ordinances that allow for like flea markets or small outbuildings where people are having like sell stuff? Essentially is what I'm thinking about. Is there a provision that allows that type of structure, like the small temporary structure or the flea market, something between a tent and a shed that would allow economic development in areas across the city?
Yeah, it's gonna, what they fall under is going to be case by case, but there are opportunities for outdoor sales. If it is in a permanent structure, that may be a little bit different, but will still fit in a lot of the districts that allow the retail uses. Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my questions.
Okay.
Excellent.
Ready for me, Chair, to go on, or are there more questions?
Let me check. I don't see any. Let me just make a quick verbal request for any additional questions. I think we should go ahead and go forward.
Okay. Uses are being consolidated in the UDO. If you look in our current ordinance, you have to go to different districts and it's hard to compare between districts. So this is a sample of the use table that is in the UDO, where you can go for find all of the uses here and all of the zoning districts and whether they're allowed by right, which means that there's an X, whether they were allowed under prescribed conditions, whether a use is allowed, and we have this with very few uses, only with a conditional plan, or whether a use is not allowed in a district at all. So we've tried, again, to consolidate all of this, make it a lot easier to understand. We have a single set of definitions for uses, and prescribed conditions can all be found in the same place. So an attempt, even though it may not look simple, actually to simplify. And we think as people use the ordinance, this will be much easier than what we currently have.
Laura, this is Commissioner Barbie. I have a quick question on this slide.
Sure.
As we begin to implement this and we find that there are uses that are not allowable under certain zoning districts, are we grandfathering those particular businesses or entities?
If they currently exist, yes, they
Okay.
will be legally, non-conforming means that they're legal, but it's easier to say the term and people feel more comfortable. They will be legally non-conforming uses. Yes.
For the duration of their existence, or is there a time frame on that?
There's no time frame. So as long as they continue operating as they are, they can continue to be there.
Okay, and my last question, do we make an effort as a city to inform these businesses of the opportunity to get that, or is it just automatically assigned to them?
Automatically assigned to them.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
They don't have to do anything. So
Quick follow-up on that. Are they notified that they're legally non-conforming? And I know we're in the weeds here, but
yeah, well, I'm thinking of how many parcels. Kathy may know this off the top of her head. There are in the community, we would have to analyze each and every parcel. So no.
285,000.
Yeah. To imagine us analyzing each and every one of them, we would be writing a new UDO before we got finished with that initiative.
True. I just want, again, that was one of those, just make clear to everybody how this is working.
293,000.
Thank you, Alicia. Ready with the numbers. I love it. Thank you for answering my question.
Certainly. Next slide. A little bit about the neighborhood 1 districts, because we know that this is impacts a large amount of our community. We are, based on the comprehensive plan, allowing single-family duplex and triplex dwelling units on all lots in the N1A through N1E zoning districts. Quadruplex dwellings on arterial streets when they are providing an affordable housing unit. So it's really a bonus to go from a triplex to a quadruplex with that affordability. The N1F district is allows the same dwelling units in the other N1 districts, but also allows limited small-scale townhomes and multifamily dwellings. Also, it should be mentioned that all of the N1 districts allow certain non-residential uses, such as places of worship, schools, and the reuse of existing neighborhood commercial establishments under prescribed condition. We don't have a lot of these in town, but we do have some. And we see rezonings occasionally for people to be able to use these older buildings in town, and we're trying to make it so people don't have to go through a rezoning to use these. Next slide. This is a little maybe challenging to understand. So give me a chance to do my best. This is something we're hearing a lot about. And actually, I think there was a news clip on WSOC in the last day or two on this. This is the height requirements for duplexes and triplexes. And what we have attempted to do is recognize that we are allowing new housing types in established neighborhoods. A lot of these neighborhoods have, especially as you're in town, have one-story homes. And we want to recognize the character and make sure that we don't have new duplex and triplex dwelling units that overpower the neighborhood and change the character of the neighborhood. So this is an initial proposal that we've, again, gotten a lot of feedback on, but that these side walls, and that's the side of the building facing your side of your home, facing your neighbor's home, would be 12 feet in height, or the average of the sidewall heights of the homes on either side of you. You can increase that by increasing your setback. We've heard from folks that that's probably not enough at 12 feet. So we'll see what additional comments we get and get back with you. And so again, a little bit, if you're not, if you don't read these every day, it may be a little confusing, hopefully for most of you all, or all of you all, it isn't, but 12 feet on the side, unless your neighbors are taller, or you move your building in, is the bottom line on this. Next slide. We do have some alternative development options in the draft. One is the conservation residential development, which is an updated version of what we have in our current regulations. A cluster development really means that you get to have smaller lots if you save more essentially green space, natural features on your site. And this really can provide a great environment for new housing. It also helps with sites that have a lot of natural features, and yet there's the desire to still be able to develop those sites in a way that is profitable. And then we have updated the voluntary mixed income bonus that has admittedly not been used in our community. What we have done, one of the things we've done is eliminated the geographic limitations on this, so that this can be used in any part of our community. In addition, obviously, you get to build duplexes and triplexes, which should, for a brand new development, allow more housing to be built at a lesser cost. Next slide. And then the overlay districts that I mentioned earlier, the new ones, the neighborhood character overlay, we're hearing a lot of interest in this. These would be, by the way, applied to all but the N1F zoning districts. Neighborhood character is really the opportunity for a neighborhood to come together, work with staff, identify what is unique in their neighborhood, what are the unique characteristics, and add those as standards that to either in addition to or replace the standards that are in the zoning for their neighborhood. We also have a simplified version of that, which is the residential infill overlay, which has some built-in standards. It is not neighborhood specific, but it does allow you to have some protection of character of your neighborhood. And then something that is quite popular around the country right now, a cottage court overlay, typically where you have your housing on smaller parcels around a green space or along streets. So I'm hoping to see folks use this. It will require rezoning to apply any of these districts. Parking, we have a 3-tiered approach. And this is something we got a lot of conversation with Transportation Planning Committee of Council yesterday, a lot of perspectives. What we have tried to do is align the requirements with the character development. So our tier 1 is the most auto-oriented, frankly, type of development where we have minimum off-street parking requirements, what we're proposing, and no maximums. Tier 2, kind of your middle ground, we have minimum and maximum parking requirements. And tier 3 is where our top districts are, our center city district, our regional activity center. No parking minimums, except for a few uses, particularly when they're close to residential neighborhoods, the way this is proposed. And there are maximum parking, so that sites don't get overused for parking. And so we can build that really great walkable urban environment, which is really hard to do when you have a lot of parking out there. And we've done this successfully with Todd, not just with the most recent districts, but with our original districts with TOD. So this has been in place in our community for over 10 years. Next slide.
Can we go back to parking? That might be a good one to pause for questions. Sure. And I think I see one from Will. I'll let him go first if he's still in.
Yeah, I actually had a question about the duplex and triplex because I'm just gonna be honest, I was completely flummoxed by that whole slide. I'll let somebody else chime in on parking because I have questions, but I don't know that there's enough information for me to accurately ask that question. So would you mind going back to the duplex, triplex, please? Okay, yeah. Can you explain this because I don't understand what this is or why it's necessary.
Well, let me tell you why. I don't think that a lot of our in-town neighborhoods that have little one-story mill houses want a 3-story duplex or triplex next door to them. We really want to respect the character of the neighborhoods.
Darth Vader is upon us. Sorry.
Oh, wait a minute. Any better?
Yes.
Much.
It goes back and forth. I don't know how far you heard. We really want to respect the character of our neighborhoods. You know, neighborhoods do have distinct character.
And so I agree with that, but I want to push back on this one a lot. Reason being is we all know Charlotte is growing at a tremendous rate, and we're getting to the point now where you're not going to find very many places in Charlotte where you're going to get greenfield development. You're just not. There's no place to do it. The way we're going to solve our housing issues and our affordability issues is going to be with incremental development, which you're going to hear me say a lot. And part of that incremental development is going to be around duplex and triplexes, because that's going to be a way to get housing units fairly quickly. I am in construction. I'm reading this. I have no idea what this means or how it even helps. In fact, I think it's an unnecessary barrier to development. So I understand that you need to preserve character, because I agree with that. You do. But why can't a duplex or a triplex just be folded into like a NCO or an RIO? Like if you're coming into an area where you've got one floor buildings, then by place type, you probably should build a one floor duplex or triplex. I don't see too many multi-story triplexes anyway outside. You may see them 2 stories, but anything over 3 is usually like an uptown or a South End type deal. So I guess I'm at a loss as to why this particular height setback is necessary.
As I said, we are looking to see, and we're hearing that maybe 12 feet. This is, by the way, the UDO mascot behind me. That 12 feet may not be the right number. So we're certainly hearing that. We also don't think that, well, a 35-foot flat roof building next to mill homes is the right answer either. So we're trying to find that middle ground. And that's really what the UDO effort is about. So bear with us. We'd be glad to hear the feedback. The problem with doing the character overlay in the Rio is they have to be applied through a rezoning process. And that's not the simplest way to protect the character. I will also, I'm just going to say, I did live down the street from a 1-story duplex a number of years ago in Plaza Midwood. So they are out there. I think sometimes people are thinking that these structures have to be large. Well, part of providing the affordability is a 1-story duplex may have, smaller units that actually help provide that affordability.
Right. So, and that's what I was going to say. That's why I think that this is going to be actually a hindrance to development. So if you're thinking about duplex and triplexes, the people who are going to build these aren't going to be your giant development organizations, your Crosslands, your Bissells. They're not building these. Even your larger multifamily constructions aren't building these. Duplex and triplexes are going to be built by somebody that's got some equity or own a piece of land and want to do something with it. So you're really talking about a small scale developer or a homeowner who's going to want to change it. The chances of them coming in and building a 3-story duplex is extremely rare, just because of the cost involved. I mean, you're talking about a 1-floor duplex or triplex. I mean, in the current market, those things are running over $600,000, right?
Sure.
And if you're going to build a 3-story duplex or triplex, you're talking about $1.2, $1.3 million. So, and even if we didn't have material pressures, the chances of you getting that are small. I think we're solving for something that all likelihood won't happen or won't happen very often. And I think this is an actual impediment. And I mean, maybe I just hate math, but like me trying to figure this out, I would just throw my hands up and say, I don't want to do it. I'm just not going to deal with it. And that would be a disservice to the city.
Will, question, but whether or not you hate math, is your biggest concern anything related to the sidewall height and or is it that there is any limitation? Like, is your biggest concern that there is a number you've got to meet, or is it that 12 is way too low a starting point?
I think my biggest concern is just any number I got to meet.
Okay.
Because it's just an artificial barrier. There's no, it's artificial. It's not solving for a real problem. It's solving for a potential problem. But if I'm going to build a duplex or a triplex, you've introduced this new calculus into what I've got to build. Chances are that if I'm limited to these artificial numbers, I can't make the numbers work to get it built anyway. So I'm not going to build it.
I see. Okay.
So
Nice.
I think we need to rethink that one.
So my take on it is that if we build something in, oh, did I get Darth Vader? If we build something in, I think it will add a lot of, I don't know, at least comfort, and it may or may not be well-founded comfort to some of the existing some of the existing communities that are out there. And I kind of felt after I spent some time with this slide on a different presentation, I kind of started to develop, okay, I have some understanding then at least what is going to pop up next door more than, hey, this is the total height, which is a lot of what we get right now. And so it did give me some comfort. And this was way back when we were looking at it in the Ordinance Advisory Committee, I know. But so I had landed on maybe this is the better way to get some level of comfort to the existing homeowners. But I think your point's pretty interesting. If it just destroys the type of development we're hoping to encourage here, we might step wrong.
Yeah, there needs to be a discussion. And again, that's why I've been pushing so hard to really bifurcate the ordinance. There needs to be a whole separate system for small scale development like duplexes and triplexes that is outside the realm of development of multifamily units and typical commercial development. It just does, because this is what you run into when you try to lump it all together. Like the cost constraints and the capital constraints for smaller scale development often don't mesh with the rules of well-intentioned planning, because they're whole separate things that have to be accounted for. Like, for instance, you're talking about a 12-foot max sidewall height. Well, a normal story on a building is 10 feet. So if you're going to have an 8-foot ceiling in your house, then I'm gonna need at least 2 feet above that to put stuff up, to put my air conditioning unit, heating and air. That's 10 feet. So now you're telling me that I've got 12 feet. Well, how do I make sure that that additional 2 feet will give me enough room to provide draft in my attic, so that I don't burn up my unit trying to heat and cool my space below? So it sounds good, but you run into some practical issues when you're shoehorning these type of developments into an overall zoning. There needs to be something focused on helping people who have smaller scale developments like this.
Good deal. Any other questions? I have one for you on the parking. If you want to go back to the parking slide, I don't think it's a too time consuming. Check my notes. Okay, I had one for you on parking. It has apparently slipped my mind, so I'm good to go forward if you are. Thank you.
I know we're running a little long. Just wanted to highlight that we have electric vehicle charging stations requirements in the ordinance. They are limited for certain uses. Our multifamily stacked, residential components of mixed use, hotels, parking lots, and parking structures as a principal use. they're not counted against someone's maximum. And where they are actually, where there's a minimum parking required, they do count towards, if they're installed, 2 spaces. So they are giving a little bit back in that way. Getting some interesting feedback on this. And we also heard early on from the folks in the Office of Sustainability about the desire to do this. So we'll see where we land. Next slide. We do have parking standards related to location and access. They are in Article 19. So just so that folks know, I know you can't see this on the screen, the table on the right, but there are location and access requirements for surface parking areas that do differ by zoning district. So we have tried to tailor these to different zoning districts. Next slide. Also some standards for design of parking structures. As we expect to see more parking in our community, we want to have these structures to the largest extent possible fit into the urban environment. And we did start this approach with the TOD district. So we're just expanding this to additional districts in our community. Landscaping and screening. Some of this is going to probably seem very familiar to you. Parking lot perimeter landscaping, parking structure landscaping. If under certain conditions, we do still have buffers.
Maybe a plastic one in the drawer.
They were
I think.
formerly called buffers. Now they're called landscape yards, and then screening for loading areas and solid waste services. And it is driving me crazy that I need to turn on my lights. So I will be right back with you as we switch to the next slide.
No problem. Thank you. You were fading to the blackness. Commissioners, in the interest of making sure we can keep moving, if any, I'll periodically be checking the hand raise feature. If anybody does have a question, we'll still try and stop, obviously. But if anybody has a question, I can try and catch it a little bit closer to that slide. If you just use the hand raise feature, I'll try and grab you. All right, back to you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging me. Next slide. Again, the landscape yards, I think everyone here understands landscape yards is really to make sure that uses that might have
Laura,
adverse
it's difficult
impacts.
to understand you again. Yeah, I didn't want to say it out loud.
You can say it.
You faded into the darkness and then you became Darth when you came back.
Man, she's
Still?
intimidating when she's like that.
Still, Darth,
Nope, it's better.
it comes and goes. I don't know what it is. Thank you for bringing that up anytime. It's become a joke on our team. So anyway, we want to make sure that uses that might have an impact on less intense uses have a separation that mitigates that impact. This will apply to new construction, addition to existing structures, new outdoor activities, change of use, and in a number of conditions. So really, again, trying to mitigate impact. I'll try turning my camera off and see if that will help. The landscape yards, AKA buffers, are based on your zoning district, what type of development is your building, what you're next to, and then that will tell you what class. And there are 3 classes, which really means 3 widths of landscape yards. So there may also be cases where landscape yards are required by the prescribed conditions for use. But again, your zoning district, you look at your zoning district, you say, I'm going to build, a townhouse in N2C. I'm a budding single family duplex or triplex. Therefore, my landscape yard class is a B, the middle landscape yard. Next slide. We also have open space requirements. And one thing that is confusing people a lot as they're looking at the district is that they don't understand this is usable open space. So if there's nothing else that you remember about open space, it is not just having a plot of grass between your driveway and the edge of your property. This is usable open space. We have design requirements for it in table 16.1, and we do have some exemptions. But we want to make sure that there is a place for people to be able to go sit outside and enjoy the space that they're in. And we're looking at ways that we can overlap this with, say, the amenitized tree area and something in the tree standards that we'll be talking about next month. Next slide. And as this is written, and we're looking at tweaking some of this. This is just an example. We show that for example, the IMU district, 10% of the site is open space. That does not mean, though, that 10% of the ground is open space. You have a lot of options on where that open space can be. It can be on a roof, it can be on a balcony. And so it is not necessarily at ground level. If you are doing a commercial development, 50% of your 10% or 5%, we're looking at how we can actually go back and make this clear in the next draft, would be required to be publicly accessible, available to the public. We've also found that in some places where we've said we need public open space, it really may not make sense to have things always available to the public. And in a lot of cases it does, in a few it doesn't. So we're still looking at that. Next slide. Okay, these are the standards in Article 16. Again, offering that increased flexibility in the location and design of the open space. Decks, galleries, porches, terraces, patios, rooftops. It does not always have to be on the ground. So important thing for you to know when you hear maybe folks saying, oh my gosh, open space is eating up so much of our site. Well, maybe, but maybe not, depending on how you're designing. Next slide. Okay, that kind of is the quick review of zoning. Just want to make sure you guys are aware of some of our UDO resources and where we are in the process. We go to the next slide. We have what we think is a pretty robust website. You can see the draft on there. People can comment on the draft using the online platform. We have well over 600 comments so far and growing every week. We have opportunity to subscribe for updates. There are resources. You can watch some of the meetings that we've had and additional information. I'll go into a few of these as well. Next slide. So we did complete virtual conversations. We had actually 20 sessions on 10 different topics at noon and at 6 when we had them, and over 300 total participants. And if you go to the next slide, well, at the end, I'll tell you about what's coming up. We have the recordings from those conversations, as well as the chat transcripts and the meeting slides available, so that folks who were not able to make the meetings but are still interested in the topic, or what are people saying, can go back and listen to those.
And you are collecting those, that information on how often those are utilized, right?
Yes, we're tracking. You mean when the people are going back and listening again?
Correct.
Yeah, that we ask our team members to go back and watch 5 or 10 of them every weekend. Guess get the numbers up. No kidding. So yes, we are tracking to see how many folks are going back and watching them. Next slide. We have recently released, we actually hope to get these a little bit earlier out in the process, but some educational videos that are based on choosing your own interest. And they talk about what the UDO means for existing neighborhoods, new neighborhoods, existing businesses, and new development. Provides a high-level explanation of what the UDO could mean for each of those scenarios. So if you haven't had a chance to look at these, we encourage you to go look at them and let other folks know that they're out there. Next slide. Again, I mentioned a minute ago the comments that we were receiving. Over 600 comments so far through the online portal. We review and consider each of the comments. We're posting them on a rolling basis, and we are also responding to them on a rolling basis. Some of them we won't respond to probably until about the time the next draft is out, because we're reviewing, we're waiting for additional comments on the same topic. Others that are more technical in nature, we're able to give very early responses. Next slide. Okay, so again, the website, this is a little bit repetitive, so we encourage you to visit the website. We encourage you to encourage other people to visit the website. Also, a reminder that there is a 26-page reference guide that may help folks who are not very familiar with looking at ordinances get a feel for what the ordinance is, how it's laid out, how you can walk through it, and provides a summary of some of the new concepts in the UDO. Sorry, I'm repeating myself, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, we have actually 4 topics that we're going to gather additional information on. These are actually going to be listening sessions where staff will provide a little bit of background information, and our intent really then is to hear from people. The first one is Thursday, or the first 2 are Thursday, a session at noon and a session at 6. We'll be talking about the heritage tree protection options, or what's in the draft now, and getting a lot of feedback on that. So we'd like to hear some of it in person. Short-term rentals, that amazingly, we have more comments on short-term rentals in the comment portal than anything else in the draft. March 3rd, feedback on the neighborhood 1 zoning districts, and then we'll talk about parking on the 10th. The next slide, that may be it. Thank you. I know this has been a rather long presentation. Be glad to answer any additional questions you have.
No, thank you, Laura. I think it was not concerned about the time. This is time well spent, I do feel. And helping everybody come up to speed on this. We have been focusing on policy map being a little bit more than this. So I want everyone to make note of all the different ways that they can hear more and participate in the process, even if it isn't live, by watching those videos. And actually, I had not spent that much time looking at the ones y'all produced, which I might start referring other people to those more often than try and point to one of the other sessions for them to watch. But I'll definitely check those out. And I know I've signed up for a few of the listening sessions. I'd encourage fellow commissioners to as well. Any other questions from the commissioners? I'll go ahead and call on Will if he wants. That's all right. Enough on that.
No, I didn't have a question. I just had I just wanted to make an announcement if you had time.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So I'll make it quick. I know you guys have heard me talk a lot about small scale development and incremental development. So I wanted to let you know that there will be a small scale development lecture that's going to be hosted by Incremental Development Org, which is sponsored by the City of Charlotte, Historic West End Partners, and Urban Maine. I will send you the email if you have not seen it already, but this will give you a lot of insight into what I'm talking about and why I've been so passionate in pushing it. So that will be on February 26th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And again, I'll send you that email so you can check it out. I hope you guys will. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Will. Definitely. Yeah, share that with us. Excellent. And again, I'll point out that sometimes the best way for us to get informed is to see how staff is talking to the general public. So I do periodically go back and watch. And part of the reason why I always ask, are you collecting information on how many people are watching those videos and everything? Because there is a lot of information that is shared and conveyed in there. Oh, yes. Good idea, Will. If you send that to Kathy, she can help get that out.
Mr. Chair, Alicia's hand is up.
Yep. Excellent. Alicia, please.
I have a quick question, Will. Is there anyone from entitlement, land development, or planning staff on those conversations?
You know what? I'm not sure. I don't know, to be honest. I just know I've been in contact with Historic West End partners about this, and so it came from the city, so I'm assuming that it is, but I'll get it out to you guys so you can see it.
We have a many city, many.
And my only reasoning is that if we are talking about small scale development, I think it's helpful to make sure that the conversation is rooted in existing policy and regulations. And not to say that it won't, but just to make sure that what the messaging and everything is aligned with where we think we're headed with the work we're working on now and what's actually in place. That's all. We don't have to be a part of the discussion, just making sure we're aware and in the room to listen or something.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to send it to you. This is more like a lecture that just tells you like what it is and what it does. That's all.
It was a something for me.
Be good for all of us to be enlightened. Definitely. All right. Hold on, let me see if I've got any hands or yes, requests. Okay. Anybody have any other comments or business for the good of the order?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, these slides will be sent out to us right afterwards. There was a lot of information to take in on UDO. I'd like to review that.
Absolutely correct. Kathy, I presume.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. And I will entertain a motion so that everybody can do what they do when you get to an extra 20 minutes.
This is Commissioner Barbie. I'm happy to make that motion.
Excellent. Can I get a second? And then we'll move with.
I second that. It's Commissioner Gaston.
Thank you, Commissioner Gaston. All right, everyone. Thank you. And we'll see everyone in a couple of weeks. Unfortunately, we'll be voting on policy mapping next month. We won't have to have a special meeting. That does mean everybody should start making sure that we're well informed on that schedule and making sure that when we get to the point where we need to be on the public hearing with City Council, that everybody is ready and watching.
Yes.
That's it.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Or we get to stop streaming and recording.